to our oral history program with Manzanita Writers Press. I'm Monica Rose, your host today, and we would love to thank California Humanities for their wonderful grant to support this for Calaveras County and our Mother Lode region, and also the Calaveras Community Foundation. They've helped us with equipment and editing software. Thank you so much, everyone, and our wonderful community that we live in that's very history bound. And we have guests today that are just fantastic. I'm so excited about these two ladies. They really are the core of many of our history projects here in our region, very much at the core. And they're professionals and highly trained and highly skilled and knowledgeable in their fields. So I'd like to introduce first Judith Marvin, who's a historian for our area and a whole list of other things that she does. And also Julia Costello, archaeologist, and so both of them novelists, not novelists, but authors. They have books here today, and we want to share their lives, their visions for the future and the past, and taking a look at where they've been in their careers and what they've done here in this county for us, and take a look at some of their books as well. So welcome, ladies. Glad you're here. So maybe you could start out. This is kind of a journey into your coming here originally. What was the origin? How did you get your company formed? And tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think Judith should start because she has the longest history in Calaveras County. And then I'll jump in her later years.
Well, I was raised in Mill Valley, but my father was a safety engineer for mines. So we used to spend a good deal of time up here because right after World War II, a lot of small mines were reopening. And so he'd come up and talk to them about safety. And so we usually stayed in the Murphy's motel. He said the hotel wasn't safe because it had no rear exit. So we would come up here and we would stay for a week, usually spring vacation, and then wander around. My father worked, and my mother and brother and I would wander around the cemeteries in the town for the day. And I came to love Murphy's, and also love Sheep Ranch, where I found an old hotel when I was a little kid, I think 8 years old. And in 1968, we purchased the hotel with three families from Marin County, which we still own and just use for vacation. So that started it, and then I decided I just wanted to get out. Mill Valley just became filled with yuppies, and I decided I'd like to move to Murphy's. So it was another old house I'd known since I was a kid at Table Mountain Ranch. And so we asked if they'd sell it, and 2 years later we bought it in 1975, and that's when I moved here. And then I went to work at the county. In 1976, I became part of the Bicentennial Commission, and one of the things they did was they restored the old courthouse, and they were required to hire someone with some professional credentials to run the museum. And I had graduated from UC Berkeley with a degree in history, and so I went to work there and worked there for 11 years as director of the Museum and Archives, and received grants to do first catalog the archives, then to do an exhibit at the museum, and then to catalog all the museum artifacts too. So, and during that time, there was the New Maloney's project, so I met a lot of people who were working on the New Maloney's project.
So one of them was me. So I was in charge of the historic sites at New Maloney's, which naturally put me in touch with Judith Marvin, who's the head of the archives. The New Maloney's, of course, encompassed both Tuolumne and Calaveras County. It was half and half. As the reservoir filled, half our sites were in each area, so I began to work closely with Judith. But how I got up to the New Maloney's project was, lots of chance and serendipity, but I got an MA in archaeology from University of Denver. in 1972, and then I had the opportunity to go to the Middle East. And I had family ties to Lebanon, so I used those family ties to get on excavations on Phoenician and Roman and Bronze Age sites. And I stayed there for 2 years until 1974, and then the internal war in Lebanon made everybody refugees. Projects were unfunded, you know, everybody had to go home. And I went at that time to Santa Barbara, where a college roommate lived. And I thought it would be a few months and everything would settle down and I would go back to Lebanon again. And that didn't happen. It was actually 20 years before Americans were permitted to go back in Lebanon. So settling in Santa Barbara, I decided to pursue my academic career. I was the director of the Presidio Digs in Santa Barbara, and then when the New Maloney's project came, they needed someone to direct the historic sites, and there weren't that many archaeologists looking at the historic period. Most archaeologists at that time were doing prehistoric Indian sites. But since I'd come from the Middle East and dug cities and civilizations, that the Spanish missions in California were much like the Roman sites. This was essentially Rome in the New World. It was all the Spanish architecture and techniques and Roman technologies brought through Spain, through the New World, and up to Alta California. So that got me embedded in historic archaeology, and from that it was an easy step to the gold rush and to looking at sites after the Indian period. So I was hired as this young pre-PhD. I was on a PhD program, but I hadn't finished my dissertation yet. And there were 1,000 sites in the New Maloney's project, about 500 prehistoric, 500 historic, and I was in charge of identifying, mapping, excavating, and evaluating 500 historic sites, and I was completely underqualified. Everybody was underqualified. This was the largest archaeological project that had ever happened in the United States.
Wow.
And it was an adventure for all of us, and it was like coming out of a war zone. Still, those of us who meet at meetings and say, we were on the New Maloney's project together, it's a badge of, you know, early war, early accomplishing enormous things. And that got me up here, and when the project ended, and I faced moving back to Santa Barbara, I thought, I don't want to move back to Santa Barbara. I was living in Tuolumne County at the time. I said, I want to stay here. And cultural resource management, the requirement to have archaeological and historical studies done before development took place. The laws were just being implemented. 1974, the federal laws were passed, and soon after, CEQA came into effect, the California Environmental Quality Act. So I teamed up with Judith, who was pretty much ready to leave the archives, and said, why don't we start a company and we can do cultural resource work up here. She thought that was a good idea too. And maybe we should talk about our first project, which involved friends.
So what was the name of your company?
Foothill Resources.
Foothill Resources.
And it was incorporated, but we learned we had options, so we used limited, thinking, I don't know what we thought. But Foothill Resources Limited was then founded in 1983, because we just had our 40th anniversary party.
Yeah.
Oh, isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
It was great.
Well then, my close friend, Barton Stevenow, who, as we all know, was involved in wines and ski resorts and all kinds of other things, decided to reopen the Carson Hill mine, which his family had worked since 1849. And so he purchased that, and he said, you know, they required me to do this kind of study about history and things like that. What am I supposed to do? And I said, well,
we
lo
can
and
do
behold, we can do that. So that was our first big project. And then from there, the Royal Mountain King mine opened, and they thought we were friendly with mining and new mining terms and things. And we were hired to do the project at Royal Mountain King mine, and we did several others. I think the Lincoln mine in Amador County, and anyway, so we got going with mines.
And I want to add, under the tutelage of Bill Fuller,
Yes.
who straightened out our vocabulary and our identification of field techniques, and he was invaluable.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a good mentor.
very
Oh,
good.
he was wonderful.
He was
Yes.
wonderful, yeah.
Yeah.
So I know you've been involved in all kinds of projects through your professional business. I know there was that one that you were talking to me about with, after the Butte fire, where you were
Oh,
Yeah.
the historic sites
Right.
that we had lost. And that's an amazing project. And I know you've done many over the years, and you want to talk about the ones that maybe stimulated you the most. But that was fascinating to me. It's a reconstruction in a way of a history lost.
Yes, and it was, again, your connection with all your colleagues. So we had a colleague, Garrett Finenga, an archaeologist, and he was the head archaeologist at Cal Fire at that time. And he talked his boss into getting a grant to study historic sites burned in the Butte Fire. So at Calaveras County, so he called me and Judith and said, can you identify historic, over 100 years old, we use that as a general thing, that were destroyed in the fire. This would be buildings,
Yeah.
ranches, complexes. And of course, there was no problem coming up with a list. And
sure.
we were under quite a bit of pressure. This is the report coming out of it. And it's available, I think, online with some of the site stuff redacted. But most of our studies end up in these kind of spiral-bound reports that nobody sees.
Oh, that's a
Hundreds
shame.
and hundreds of them.
Really?
This one did get some publicity, and we gave some talks on it.
I remember that.
But besides being interesting to reconstruct the history, we were under a lot of time pressure because they had the hazmat crews coming in to do cleanup on all the burned out sites. And of course, we had to get there before they did, or there would be nothing to study. So we were kind of, we pulled a crew together. We got a lot of volunteers from around the state. Friends of ours came. And we did a very nice study. We presented several papers on it, but the message we wanted to send out clearly was that it would have been so much easier to record these sites before they burned.
Yeah.
Yeah. So here we are going through ashes and looking at foundations and measuring where the barn was by rocks left under, burned out timbers, and going, why doesn't Calaveras County have a program to record our historic sites? So we use this example as kind of an evangelical club to hit people over the head with. It hasn't made much progress yet, but we're hopeful.
And I remember, just a little personal note, when you came out to our property, and my
Yes.
husband was just amazed. I mean, and Julie, it was so amazing. He told me, I wish I could have been there, I was gone or something. And you took the tour and you found, because we have this wonderful stone, what we thought was a Italian oven, because it looked very similar to the one at the museum. And then, you came out and said, "Oh, you had a commercial operation on your property. This is a hearth, and there's quite a lot going on. And here's the road, and it just amazing. You found the spring box. You found, where there was another. We had no idea, what was there.
Fun.
We had some idea that there was a homesteader there or some kind of a miner back in the 40s, but."
Yeah.
So, you just did this on your own,
So by that same, how much richer your piece of land came to you from knowing its history,
Yes.
that's what we argue for the citizens of Calaveras County.
Yeah.
How much richer when they know the place names and they know what
Right.
that mining site happened, or they know where the native sites are, or they
Right.
know, the ranch names. It just makes it, the whole land we live on, more exciting and richer.
It is, and as we still
Yeah.
pull up the nails, the hinges, pieces of Chinese pottery that the gophers throw up, and we're thinking, this was a rich place. There was a road that went through that was a major thoroughfare,
Yeah.
and we have no idea. And so your work is so important. How do we get more support for you? I mean, what can we do? What can
I'm
we
so
do?
glad you asked.
I know you've got
glad
a lot more to say, but I just want to get that
Well,
out before I.
We have been trying to get the county to enact a historic preservation element for about 40 years.
40.
Yes, and we were always turned down because it'll stop development, nothing will happen, the builders don't want it, developers don't want it, no, scary, scary. But Tuolumne County enacted one back in the 1980s, and I happened to work on that with Shelley Davis King writing the contextual history of Tuolumne County, which has saved them immense amounts of money. And anybody that comes to work on any historic property, all they have to do is refer back to that document. They don't have to reinvent the wheel. So, as you know, it hasn't stopped development in Tuolumne County. And part of those things that Tuolumne County does that's wonderful, they do historic resources inventories. And this is Soulsbyville, and this is Jamestown.
Wow.
And we also did
Amazing.
Sonora, but I'm afraid that's too heavy to carry. But the wonderful thing that Tuolumne County does is reproduce these and have them for sale. So it's a way to get income for what you're doing. And so recently, I mean, we've been trying so long, and I was just talking to a good friend, Amanda Follendorf, and I said, Amanda, is there anything we can do about, historic preservation? This was, about 4 or 5 months ago. And she said, I'll get back to you in a couple of weeks. She said, I had a meeting, and the county's going to go ahead with it.
They are?
Yes.
They are. I'm in shock.
We are too.
Movement.
We are too.
Movement forward.
It hasn't happened yet, but even to get a positive
Yeah.
response and kind of counting the supervisors, maybe the votes,
Yeah.
to move
Yeah.
ahead. But when we did our general plan, we finally certified after 10 years of dragging feet, our new general plan. That's the time we could have just put in a historic preservation element. And it didn't happen. And we would go to all the public meetings, they had them in each community. And at each public meeting, they kind of took an inventory of what people thought were the assets for the county. And in every public meeting around the county, number 1 or number 2 was history. So in polling the people, they know it's history, they love it up here, they don't realize how tenuous it is. They don't realize that there's no legal protections, and frankly, our history has been largely preserved because we don't have a lot of economic development. So we've just lucked out, but that could change, and the county wants it to change, and we need to get ahead of it.
Yeah. I mean, I remember when my kids were young, and we came up here in '82, and we would go to the archives regularly. Of course, the library was right next to it, so that was helpful, but you could go into the archives any day. It wasn't limited hours or by appointment. It was open to all.
Nice.
And I actually remember, opening up the boxes, looking at the old newspapers from the 1840s and 50s and touching them, bare hands, no gloves, no nothing, and the edges falling off. And I was thinking then, wait a minute, they shouldn't be allowing people to touch this really, because the edges are falling off, the paper's really, it's disintegrating. But I thought even then, but how nice it was to be able to have access to it.
Well, we're very lucky that we have a county archives.
Yeah.
Tuolumne County has spent a great deal of money on theirs, built a whole building, and put the archives in there, and has full-time employment for an archivist, and they have about 5 or 6 volunteers that work every day of the week. Working on cataloging everything and digitizing everything. But we have a wonderful archivist, Shannon Van Zandt, who's also working on the preservation, coming up with lists. I'm helping her, and I think you are, and Salmana is, lists of all the historic properties we think should be listed in Calaveras County. But we want to urge that the county maintain the archives forever. It's been a big so many different years we had to fight for it in budgetary aims. But
Well, maybe with the blossoming of this new commitment, that can be expanded. More archivists,
It could be.
more
It
assistants.
always competes for money.
yeah.
So in the county budget, libraries, arts programs, archives, and so they were going to, at one point, I think it was in 2008 or something, they were going to just cut the archives altogether. And there was a contingent went from the Calaveras Heritage Council, which was founded to help the archives, to support them, and went to the supervisors' meetings and said, you are mandated by the state to maintain an archives. You cannot simply close it. Well, everybody kind of set up, and Shannon volunteered to cut her hours back, and she's now there 2 days a week and has volunteers. But the building needs taking care of. But it's a fabulous collection. Statewide, this is one of the most complete county archives in the state of California. A lot of it by chance. There just wasn't a fire or an earthquake or something to destroy it.
Or they didn't take it to the dump like most of
Right, to take it to the dump.
counties did.
So we have this fabulous record that is not well-funded and not well taken care of and not appreciated. Kind of like our buildings. I wanted to point out these inventories that Judy's talking about is inventorying the buildings. So you go down the main streets, the side streets, you define a district, you inventory the important buildings that are there, you do historic research on them, you decide whether they've been changed a lot or they still look authentic, and then you make an inventory of them. And these, Judy got funding for virtually all of those. Sonora maybe got their own funding.
No, they got the funding, and then they hired us to
And then
do
they hired us to do the
to
surveys.
do the survey. But locally, Angels Camp, I didn't bring the whole report, but Angels Camp did a historic resources inventory of the commercial district. So they have one, they're the only one in the county that has an official one. But
they
when
have
I
a
worked
walk-
for the
the
county,
walking
I
map.
did inventories of virtually every place in the major communities. And but it's not official, and so many, it doesn't really help so much. But the first one I did was Knox Mellon, who was State Historic Preservation Officer, asked me to do one for Murphy's. So that was my first learning experience, I guess. And over time, working with many other people from Office of Historic Preservation and from various agencies, we've really learned a lot.
And it's good to support our museums, become members.
Yes.
I urge everybody to become members, and the membership helps support that.
Yes.
So, to get a good wide membership drive, and even if people don't attend all the meetings or the fundraisers or whatever, but just become a member, and be interested. And
Well, that's interesting, because the Murphy's Museum, which was in existence for 71 years, had to fold 2 years ago during COVID, because it was just run, I was on the board, we've run by volunteers, open sometimes 3 days a week, and the rent went up to $2,000 a month. There was no way we could handle that. So I said, what do we do? I said, the best thing we can do is put it at Angels Camp, and I got a bunch of volunteers. And not that we did a catalog, as per se, but we did a photograph and an inventory of every single thing that we put into a box, or huge things like pianos moved. And so they're down in the Angels Museum now, where they're under temperature control. They have one whole room that's the Murphy's Museum room, plus boxes and boxes and boxes. But there were the big things like pianos and I think 5 organs and huge things like that.
Wow.
Typewriters, things people give to museums. But at least it continues, and we're hoping that maybe we could do something with the old school in Murphy's now, and which has been falling apart, and we need to preserve.
The other way to make history accessible, which I want to bring up, is the Calaveras Heritage Council. In 2007 and then in 2010, we established the webpage, calaverashistory.org. And on it we put much of what Judith has written about the county, and other publications, and photographs, and maps, and old mining maps, and old township maps. And all of it is accessible online. And we monitor it. We get sometimes questions, and I try to get them to the person that can answer them. But in monitoring the hits, how many times somebody goes on it, we get between a low of 18 to 24,000 hits a month.
wow, that's fantastic.
So people are using this.
Yeah.
And I guess it'd been up a couple of years, and a friend of mine came up to me and he said, I found this great website you should know about. What is that? Calaverashistory.org. Yes. So that's great, but it's and part of it is to make good information available. There's lots of just stories, and
Right.
stories can be amusing and entertaining, but we really would like the truth to be out there somewhere. So this
Right.
is accurate things. And that I'm going to segue to the Arcadia books.
Oh, yes.
So you all know about these books.
Yeah.
You've probably seen them all over, and they have a wonderful format of having lots of photographs and kind of dense captions. And so Judy recognized early on, they don't vet their authors. Anybody who writes them with a good proposal,
Really?
yeah, we'll get in there. You may have ideas of your own.
I
on
have
what you-
ideas,
I know.
but-
So we realized if we didn't jump on this is Judy's master plan, and write Arcadia books for Calaveras County, somebody else was going to do it, and they'd probably be full of a lot of poorly written, poorly researched, superficial stuff.
Yeah.
So she did Around Murphy's first, on her own, and then she got Sal Manna and myself to help with Northern Calaveras County, and then Angels Camp in Copperopolis. And these have worn quite well. I mean, yeah.
And we
Sarah-
also did one in Jamestown,
Sarah
our
Lunsford.
editor and myself.
Yeah, Sarah Lunsford did one too, at the wineries, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Around
there's,
the area.
and there's lots of other topics that can be picked up, and
Yeah.
people can do railroads, and the
Yeah.
Italians of Amador and Calaveras, a friend of ours did, and there's breweries of Jackson, and
Yeah.
there's other topics, but we just wanted the basic history of the county covered. So somebody couldn't come in with some definitive history, and so it was strategic and also fun to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
And we
fun to
show
do.
up pictures. Yeah, and Wally Motlock, I want to thank for
Yes.
cleaning up all our old photographs, because a lot of them had problems. And we'd show them, and Sal and Julia and I would sit there selecting them. We go, has a kid and a dog? Okay, that's in.
And you found these in the archives, you found them in other books?
The
or-
photos?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Calaveras Historical Society has a fabulous collection of photos.
And so does the archives. So it was both places.
Yeah.
And can somebody just go in there and say, I'm really interested in history, become a member, and then just go in there and research on their own?
Are you asking for the archives or the Historical Society?
Historical Society. Can they just go in and?
Anybody can go.
Yeah,
You don't
look
have
at
to be a
the stacks
member.
and browse and,
You don't
okay.
have to be a
So that-
member.
Yeah, so,
And I don't know, they have notebooks with the photographs in them. The most serious documents are in the archives, the Calaveras County Archives. So that's next door to
the ledgers, the diaries.
Yes,
things.
and all
Those
that.
are so fascinating, I love looking
and
through
those
those.
are so great. And so that's, but you go there when Shannon's there or one of her assistants, and they'll help you with the research and,
So you've got, say, a curiosity maybe about, say somebody comes in, they have a curiosity about, like for me, it'd be those ovens, that hearth. I want to
Right.
find out more. I want to see, what some of the roads were that used to be, and, what kind of people traveled through, and, to get a kind of a feel, because it was the old Hertzik Ranch. And he
remember
died,
that, yeah.
He passed away before we could ask him questions, I
The
think.
father
Yeah,
did,
Father
yeah.
did.
yeah.
Because we still have, 1940-something, in the old tank and on the windmill.
Yeah,
It's
so
all
you would
dated.
you would go to the archives.
Well, the
And
archives.
you'd start with your title and do the assessment records, find out who lived there, what their
Okay.
occupations was.
Okay.
And the
We can talk to
deeds.
you afterward about this. if
Oh,
you
this
want.
sounds like, this is great stuff, and I think
So the-
anybody who wants to do something like that, you guys are consultants too, so
You're
they
right.
can contact you as well, right, for guidance.
They could, there's just an infinite amount of history, and everybody's personal history. Direct them to start with local histories and the history of their town, and go through the old maps, and
Yeah.
know their genealogy, but I don't necessarily looking for other people's projects for
more
me to do.
clients, yeah.
No.
Because you've got these projects, so tell us what you're working on, and what you've been working on.
Well, the most recent thing in McCullum Hill is the Chinatown Gardens. And we have a 4-acre site that the local McCullum Hill History Society purchased in pieces starting in 2015. And it is the site, Moke Hill was the county seat in the beginning years of the county, and had a substantial Chinatown. And virtually all the Chinatowns, all over California, there were lots of Chinatowns in any major city, but our Gold Rush, towns had a lot of Chinese. And they would have gardens, and this was to grow not only the vegetables that the Chinese wanted, but to serve the local mining community. So this gulch right in downtown Moke Hill, you get on Main Street and you end up at Center there, and then you take a right, and just in a block you're down in this gulch, and these big terraced platforms down that gulch with ditches going out to the side, and the ruins of the Buddhist temple up by the road, and a great processing platform that we found broken jars that they would have worked on. A great pond area described in old documents where they raised water chestnuts and had koi and a tea house. I mean, this was a substantial 4-acre Chinese garden, and as we began to research it, the only one left in California.
Really?
For all the hundreds of Chinatown gardens, most of them were in urban centers, San Jose, Santa Cruz, San Francisco, that grew up, and of course those would just be developed. They're just little agricultural terraces. But Moke Hill luckily got bypassed, got preserved, and got preserved by about 10 feet of blackberry bushes, because it's a wet gulch, which is why they put the gardens there, and so those blackberries just grew and grew. We had purchased part of the site when the Butte Fire swept up that canyon, and it pulled it up like a chimney. It pulled the fire from down that hillside, came all the way up almost to Center Street, and exposed a lot of the stone walls. And by then we bought some of them. We got some money from an endowment, and then purchased the rest of it, and then wrote got it registered as a site, wrote a National Register application for it, got it on the National Register of Historic Places, one of the only archaeological site in the county on the National Register, and then lobbied the Archaeological Conservancy, which is a nationwide group that buys and conserves archaeological sites. And they own, I don't know, some 600 sites, Pueblo ruins and mounds in Illinois and Florida, prehistoric sites, and they purchased it. They bought it, so they are now the owners of this nationally significant Chinatown Gardens in Little Moke Hill.
That's wonderful. So, in order to preserve, there must be others out, there must be other entities out there we just don't know about yet, is that it? Or is everything plotted out and
there's always things to be discovered.
Little surprises?
But probably not any more Chinatown Gardens.
No.
You have to have a Chinatown. And we know where those are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But isolated sites, there's thousands.
Yeah.
I mean, this place was so populated in the gold rush with temporary camps, and actually my first publication, 1984, at the New Melones Project, and it talks about just in our, one watershed there where the reservoir filled it, we had 1,000 sites. We had 500 historic sites and 500 prehistoric sites just in that canyon.
And that's filled up by the dam, or?
The reservoir has covered it all.
Has covered it all. But you documented it before the water came in.
Before the water came in.
Oh, and that's kind of what we should do with other sites, correct, here?
Right, or preserve them. Yes, but document them. Do inventories, do historic inventories. There was some push a few years ago to get San Andreas a historic district, because a number of the buildings are owned by the county. Yeah. And if the county wants to maintain and restore them, there's some tax incentives to having your building designated. So it would be helpful to the county to have this done. And then I think COVID came and it lost steam.
Well, I did one of the district, and I don't think it went anywhere, though. It was turned into the county. But I'd like to say something for buildings before they become archaeological. And we really have to, since I did that inventory of Murphy's in 1976, 1/4 of the buildings are gone, either demolished or burned or something. So it happens really fast. And right now, our school, old school, 1860, the Pine Tree Cottage, that has been where Albert Michelson went to school, and all of that is being threatened because the entity that is in charge of it wants to tear it down and build something new. Well, everybody rushed, and they said, well, it's on the State Historic Landmark, it's on the National Register of Historic Places. That's no protection at all.
No.
It's only when the county then designates them.
Really? I didn't know that.
And that's what people don't know. So people should go and look at, this is a listing of all the properties in Calaveras County that are on the register. So you can go there and find it. You can also go, that's under National Register of Historic Places by county. You can also go with State Historic Landmarks by county. And they're on the web and see all these important places before they go down. And it's happening so fast. Some of the things, though, that we've done are, I think are important, are plaques or monuments. And we did one for the Madam Felix site in Salt Spring Valley, which you can look at these later.
Yeah.
So we had a state historic landmark.
Madam Felix's
Yeah,
gold.
Yeah.
And is that still in print, Judy?
We
Can
have
people
several
purchase that?
boxes.
Okay.
There's
So-
still some, it's being sold, it's sold in the Calaveras County Historical Society book room.
Okay.
I think it is.
And I think they still have some left.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Or you can get it on Amazon for $500.
What, really?
Yeah, because
Yeah,
they're
a lot
not,
of-
they're just,
Because
they're
rare
basically
books.
out of
They're-
print.
Yeah, they're
rare books.
basically out of print. They're rare and they're very unique.
Yeah.
Well, we do have some that we should do something with.
That's true.
A few bucks. But we did, so there was a state historic line. So you put up these monuments, which the Native Sons have been great at doing. This is for Madam Felix, and then we did one for the Calaveras County Hospital Cemetery, which nobody knew existed, which is in back of Government Center. And there were several hundred burials there and one tombstone. And so the hospital, everybody that died there, they were usually poor old male miners, and they all got buried there. But that's the other thing we have to look at is the cemeteries. We're now looking at another historic hospital cemetery in San Andreas that needs to be preserved. And there are plenty of cemeteries on ranches that are private that need. I did list them, and I sent it to the county many years ago, and they lost it. But I think now we've got somebody who cares, and we can do that. And so those sorts of things, but there's also, I have to point out, my first and only state historic landmark was Cave City.
Oh,
And it was because it was the first commercial cave in California established. I mean, it's an ancient cave, but in 1854, it opened as a commercial cave.
that was what was California Caverns, correct?
Yes.
And they've changed owners since.
Oh, numerous times.
Yeah, so.
Since 1856?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they're operating now, aren't they? Are they
Oh, yes.
operating?
Yes.
So they used to do a lot of advertising, I remember in the 80s and the 90s, and it was a big deal. My daughter worked there as a tour guide and a cave guide. And, but it's quiet. You don't see a lot of marketing anymore about
I don't know.
people coming there and as
then-
much as they used to do.
There's another way to register things. This is the Avery Hotel, and that's called a state point of historic interest. So you've got national points, you've got state points, you've got Calaveras points, you've got things of all kinds of importance, and depending on their integrity too. And
So the historic preservation ordinance, which we're pushing for, the county could in one fell swoop take everything already listed on the National Register, the State Register, points of interest, state historic landmarks, everything already listed and say, okay, that's the beginning of our list.
Okay.
I mean, in a vote, they could just say, these
Oh,
have already
really?
been identified,
That's simple.
and that would give
Yeah.
them something. But we also should point out, this is just the tip of the iceberg on the historic buildings that are in Calaveras County and the historic points of interest. It's a starting point, but it's not comprehensive. I mean, it's just the most famous buildings that somebody thought to turn in some forms on. But there's so much more to be done.
Well, driving to Campo Seco, for instance, where I take our dogs sometimes for, vacation spas. Anyway, that is a fancy little place there with the old buildings, just sitting there with the weeds coming up, the cows are grazing, amongst the buildings. Is that an area that is.
I don't
Is
even
it
think
of
it's a
interest?
landmark. I don't know that it has any designation.
Well,
This
I
old
think there
building?
is a landmark just for the town
Oh,
of
for the whole
Campo
town.
Seco.
Mhm.
But that should definitely, I mean,
Yeah.
that's had a lot of deterioration.
Yeah, a lot of deterioration, but you can kind of get the feel of the place, you know,
Mhm.
how it used to be. It's kind of fascinating place. It's frozen in time.
Mhm.
Well,
But,
when people have, various film companies come and looking for locations, I always take them there for an abandoned ghost town.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because it looks great with all those stone buildings
Yeah.
along there.
yeah,
And then, you know, and then take them to certain, like San Antonio Creek or something, to pan gold, showing somebody
yeah.
panning gold and that sort of thing. So, no, but something that we found, I thought really interesting was Sault Marie. That was for the Butte store. It's spelled Jesus Maria,
Mhm.
but it was always pronounced Sault Marie
Sault
around.
Marie,
around. But that had, we got a chance to do the history of that because of the Butte fire. There was only one building still standing,
Hmm.
and it went with the fire. But by going through the archives again and listening to, reading, this building was next to this one and this one and this one, we were able to come up with a whole history of Sault Marie that had never been written before. But I should mention a couple of people who've done a lot. Emmett Joy in McCollum Hill had a huge collection of work that he had done over the years, and I think it still belongs in the Garamendi collection.
Yes.
And then there are people like Frances Bishop, who up the Highway 4 corridor, and she was fanatic about that. She went all over the United States researching logging and ranching and water and all that kind of thing. And her collection, most of it is in the county archives. And so people who've put together 40 and 50 years of research, give it someplace, because so often people die and they just throw it out and
Well,
urge them to.
you know what happened? I forget her name, the gal from Mountain Ranch. She was the one with the irises.
Lou Del Palpa.
Yes, and when she died, she was just going to give her
Yeah.
documents to her daughter. They were going to take it to the museum, the archives. Well, the fire came.
Yeah.
She was in a nursing home at the time.
Yeah.
Everything gone, all those
Mhm.
records gone. The Mountain Ranch records that she had been preserving all those years.
No, that's why it's so important
It's so
to
important.
get them
Yeah.
someplace. And another place I'd like to mention is University Pacific, which has all of Coke Wood's, Richard Cokewood, who wrote all those early histories of the county. All of his archives are at University Pacific, as are,
John Muir's journals.
pardon?
John Muir's journals, aren't they down there?
They're there too.
Yeah.
But for Calaveras County, people don't often think of that as a place to go, but there's that. And then Barton Steveno's great-grandfather, Fred Steveno, was the first director of National Resources for California and set up Fish and Game and National Park, State Park, all those things under that umbrella. And all of his papers are UOP. And also Archie Steveno, Mr. Mother Lode, who formed the Golden Chain Council. Those are there. And when Barton died, Martin Huberty and I raised some money, and we took all of his archives to University Pacific and had a room dedicated. We paid for a room in the library, the Barton Steveno room, so people can go there and research whatever topics they have too.
That's fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good.
And so, I know are you working on any books right now, currently, that you're compiling?
Well,
Something
Arcadia wanted us to do, and I think it's really important we need to do, is
yeah.
water
Right.
in Calaveras, because we have
Right.
two big districts now, Union Utica and CCWD, and they're both derived from mining ditches, and we have great photographs.
Right, and the powerhouses.
And the power.
And the mining and then ranching and
Mm.
the
Yeah.
use of them all, and now that they're municipal. And again, much of the research has been done, and the format is not so onerous, you know,
Yeah.
it makes it.
You're thinking of doing
That,
a
yeah,
series of the, that'd be great.
Because we have a big one that Shelley Davis King and I did of the Union Utica system, which is everything on the south, south side of the county. But it's like this, and it's all written. It has some maps in there. And we also did a historic properties management plan and found it eligible for the National Register. But it's on, Joel Metzger has been doing some work now getting that information out. But it should come out in something like this too,
Right.
because we have so many photographs.
It would be nice if everybody cross-referenced on these websites. You know, like the website you have, the historical one, where there's kind of a web, a hub, and you could find it all in one place to.
Right,
to
no, that'd be
link
good.
to.
We have links. I mean, our
Yeah.
website links to the genealogy website and the maps and things. And so we were talking earlier about all the videos that are being done, and we can just put a link to your YouTube website that you're going to develop for these.
Yeah, that'll be great.
And a
Yeah,
list of
'cause
who is on
we're to
there.
house everything where people can find it in a web, you know, like a hub.
Yes, no, it's very
You know,
important.
like all the museums in our area, once you, I think, achieve that goal of that historic preservation, maybe it could be housed in that kind of a, you know, where it's somewhere in the hub, all the links are out there and people can just go to the central station and find.
Right, and Shannon Van Zandt has actually written a grant to coordinate and integrate all the museums in the county. And
Okay.
we haven't heard about it, but yes, the concept is
Okay,
in process.
well, that's exciting. So
But
it
I-
takes people with visions and grants but
I wanted to mention, though, that a great deal of work that Judith and I do ends up in these huge reports that are unreadable. They're documents, and they're detailed documents, they're reference material. So the step that is often not taken, and that Judith and I have tried to take whenever we get a project to fund it, is to make a popular version of it.
Huh.
To distill out what would be interesting, what would tease people, have a good bibliography in it, so if people wanted to pursue it, they could. But that's when the big, of Madame Felix's Gold, and this is the big mining project in the, near Copperopolis, the
As
Royal,
mitigation.
Royal Mountain King. And they had not only to pay for finding, excavating, and writing these giant reports on their site, they had to pay for a popular publication. So this is Bill Fuller and Judith and myself. So that, and that's the same with the Maloney's project.
Yeah.
Although more stuff should come out about it.
So, and if people go up to the center by Malonis, will they find your books there?
They should. It has been reprinted like 7 or 8 times. It's in the public domain. And so, since it sells so regularly, I always think someone like the Historical Society or something, they can just get the plates and republish it. It's a Bureau of Reclamation, had the initial, and it's not copyrighted because it's a federal agency.
Or is it digitized? So can people get to it as an ebook?
I think it's on calaverashistory.org. I think it's on there.
Okay.
That we scanned it and put it on, but I'll have to look.
So they can just go there and it's in the public domain, so they don't pay for a purchase, or do
Well,
they
if it's
pay?
online, you can
Yeah.
just have it, yeah.
Oh, we might point out too that the Historical Society has recently digitized their entire collection of Lost Calaveras.
Yes.
They're quarterly. And we do have a link to it on our website, but they can go to Calaveras County Historical Society and get, it's a little bit involved, but you can, and it's also been indexed. So that's a
That's a
wonderful
good step
resource.
forward, yeah.
That whole publication was just, I think the first one is 1954 or something.
Something like that.
Something like that, and
Amazing.
of just getting people in the county to write their stories. I mean, now we're in the video world, and this is what you're doing. But then it was just get the stories down and get firsthand family accounts and histories, and it's a wonderful archive of the county. It's wonderful,
Oh,
yeah.
well, this is good, really good stuff.
What else
So,
haven't we talked about?
yeah, well, projects that you've done in the past that were a little unusual.
I would like to mention Greenhorn Creek.
Okay,
Yeah,
So this is another Barton Steveno project that
yeah.
he came to us now because we're his archaeologists and historians, and Judy's his very good friend. He couldn't possibly go someplace else, right? No. But this, because he knew he had to do this, we'd done Carson Hill for him, and he had partners, but they're going to develop this land into a big housing complex with restaurants and stores. And he knew he had to do this, and we said, you need to do the survey first. Before you design your complex, find out what sites are out there. And he said, absolutely. And so we spent a couple of years walking over these rolling hills with gulches and recording all the sites and finding them all. And then they took our sites, decided which ones were important, and there's still 4 historic preserves. They're all prehistoric sites around the Greenhorn Creek property. And these, let me see.
Like that Miwok Trail
That's okay.
that they're developing and trying to preserve.
Yeah, they have a hiking trail, but in their whole big development, there were 4 preserve areas that were set aside, and then, having set them aside, then they developed their roads and houses and lots. So first find out where you can't develop, instead of what most developers do is they make their development plan, and then when you say, well, there's a site here, then it costs them a lot of money, they have to change their design, they're annoyed, you know, with us archaeologists. So this was given, at statewide meetings I would go to, they would quote the Greenhorn Creek project as being the example of how to do a large project.
Makes
And
sense.
we were pleased, and Barton was pleased.
Also,
lot of
we
sense.
developed the first historic properties treatment plan of how they had to take care of these.
Right, and the City of Angels owned these easements. It's not owned by the Greenhorn Creek
Oh,
Corporation.
really?
Yeah.
And they're still involved, and generally it goes along okay, and then some little kerfuffle will happen out there, and we have to call up all the things and go, you know, you don't own this is the City of Angels gets involved, and so it's worked. It's worked so far. Yeah.
And the Union Utica system, also, we did a historic properties management plan for that. So when they go out and they've got to blow out and they've got to fix it, if it's not historic, they can fix it immediately. If it's historic, they have to call somebody and deal with it. And especially since a lot of their system is on the Forest Service, in Forest Service land, and the Forest Service has deemed it eligible for the National Register. So they have to go through certain things instead of just totally, well, the 3/4 mile flume, the most beautiful flume, boy, ever. And
Is this the one people used to float down and
Yes.
still
This is the scary one.
There
Most
it
people
is.
floated down the one with the green banks on the
Uh-huh.
grass, but this is the one you would be in a
Yeah.
chute.
Ooh, that is scary looking.
so it's 3/4 mile long.
Uh-huh.
And when that burned in the fire, they wanted to just put in a pipe. And the Forest Service said, no, this is historic flume. You have to build it back the way it was.
Good.
So they have, and now they're kind of arguing to do something else because in case this got ruined by a fire again, so I've been telling them, do it in steel. Don't just hang a pipe
Right.
off there. It's ugly, ugly, ugly. They could do this in steel, and Tuolumne Utility District has done that, replaced some of their flumes in steel.
Couldn't they just insert the steel inside the
Well, then,
existing
but
wooden
then if
structure?
the struts are burned,
Oh,
then
yeah, that's true.
And it's in an indefensible,
Yeah.
steep canyon wall, and fires are going to happen.
you know.
Yeah.
And while other parts of, especially the Highway 4 corridor, you can build these shaded fuel breaks and these berms that help protect communities from fire, at the edge of a canyon like that, there's nothing they can do. They've looked at that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And fire is a big, big, big problem,
that's our big problem.
and it's getting worse. So we could lose, like, Lahaina, we could lose a whole community here.
So what
Paradise.
So wouldn't
Ours.
you think PG&E would be involved in historic preservation?
They are.
They are.
They are?
Oh, yeah,
And-
they're deeply
And to what
involved in it.
extent? I mean, have they stepped it up a little bit with the?
Well, they have to do
the
surveys before they do anything.
They've always had to do compliance.
Yeah.
And it's California, and California is very strict about that.
But around historic sites, like going underground rather than, you
Oh,
know,
yeah.
are they required to,
They'd have to pay, somebody has to pay for it.
yeah.
So a community that's a new development undergrounds everything. I mean, that's the only smart thing to do
Yeah, it
while
is.
you're constructing it. To underground in an existing historic town is a bit more difficult because you're digging trenches through a historic town. Moke Hill undergrounded its utilities in 1980 something, 7. Ray Garamendi got the funding for that, and they dig a big trench all the way down Main Street, and I monitored it as the archaeologist.
Right.
But it was unusual. I don't, Murphy's, what do they, do you have
No.
wires going down Main Street?
We have wires.
You
yeah.
have wires.
Yeah.
An Angels Camp? I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have wires.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be nice to underground all
It
this.
would be, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not PG&E's responsibility to underground them.
No.
That's not their job.
No, but I wonder.
But Caltrans, I would have to say something for Caltrans. I know they destroy a lot of things, but they do a great deal of work before they do that. They do surveys, they do reports, they go on shelves that nobody ever reads. But, and if they don't do it, the new wagon trail project, somebody decided not to do a whole new survey since the one in 1976, except for Julie and I got one little parcel where we found a new site. They said, the archaeologists at the time just said, well, I've looked at Google Earth and it all looks the same. Well, they came upon a large Native American site, which set them back about 6 months and several $1 million. So it's really worthwhile to do this first. Same thing with Highway 108. You know, they had 2 Native American sites, and they said, well, we'll go in between them. The Native Americans said, no, you don't. It's a whole site. Again, they were shut down for 6 months and paid millions of dollars. So, and we urge anybody to do anything on their property that is an undertaking to do a survey. And mostly, you know, here if they're going to, the county is pretty good about historic buildings, about contacting us if someone has that, about recording them. But a lot of them just slipped right through, and
We'll find out later, won't we? Years later,
yeah,
down the line.
Like all those Murphy's building that Judy inventoried in the 70s, a quarter of them
a quarter of them
are gone.
gone.
That, I can't believe it. That,
Or the Butte Fire, we had
yeah,
all of our sites just burned in the Butte Fire.
just like that.
They can just go just like
Wasn't
that.
there a typewriter museum that went down in the fire? Somebody told me that we lost a typewriter museum, that in a barn. All the ancient old typewriters going back, this guy had a full collection.
Well, it's the first I've heard of it, but it may be that some individual
Yeah.
had a collection of
Yeah.
typewriters, and stories
Yeah.
grow. They
Yeah.
grow over time.
I guess they did. I knew you'd know about it if it was the case.
If there was a
but,
typewriter museum.
Yeah.
But I also, another source that we've lost, Charlie Stone in Copperopolis, who was filled with stories. His family was there since the get-go. And Charlie would tell the most wonderful stories. When we were working there on the Royal Mountain King Mine project, he said, anyone who spent a summer in Copperopolis is not afraid of hell. And we learned that.
And we've quoted that all over the
Well,
place.
because of the heat or?
The heat.
Really?
And he told his stories, besides these kinds of things, we're losing those kind of stories. Ray Garamendi had great stories. And so many of those old timers had really wonderful stories that really brought everything to life. And sometimes they're true and sometimes they're not. But they're a great story. And we miss those.
And that's what your video
what you're doing
program
here
is
is
capturing a number
Yeah,
of
and we'd
those.
like to continue. I mean, we're going to try to, you know, get the funding that we can continue this,
Yeah.
you know, not just stop, because it's so important.
Right.
Because we're losing these people left and right. I mean, you know, there's one
So you're
survivor of Pearl Harbor still alive, and that's it. You know, I mean, it's finite.
So you're working on the peoples, and we're working on the buildings.
Yep.
And the archaeological sites.
Definitely. And then, you know, I was interested too in buildings. The Leger kind of comes to mind, and you know, and I had heard stories that said they want to put bathrooms in every room, and I'm thinking, wait a minute, structurally, I don't want to get into it because there's new owners and everything, but I always wondered, you know, you really have to be careful. You can't just knock down walls in these old buildings. And
Well, they have to have engineers, and
Oh.
the new owners are
yeah,
smart and have money, and they
Yeah.
have very,
and they're going in the right. I mean,
They
they're getting
appear-
all the permission, everything they need to do in the right way to preserve it, right?
it appears that they are, that
That's
they're very
good.
sensitive to the historic building, and
That's-
they want a
that's
historic
right.
building, and they want to be part of the town.
Mhm.
They want to be involved in it, and so on most historic preservation projects, it's the exterior, preserving the look of it from the street that's key.
Oh,
Interiors are rarely covered
oh, really?
by historic preservation documentation, unless they're exceptional, unless there's something
Yeah.
extraordinary about them.
I'm thinking of the Utica Hotel and how that's taking so long, and they got the bar in there, but, you know, the big plans of what they're gonna do with that, and that's half a block almost of Angels Camp there downtown.
Yes,
But everybody would love to see that restored
yes.
and, you know, revitalize the towns, but it seems everything's at a standstill. You know,
Well,
it
Moke
seems-
Hill's plowing ahead, it's not at a standstill.
No?
I mean, no, the new owners came in, what, 3 or 4 months
With
ago?
Moke Hill, yes, they're moving forward. I mean,
That's what I,
as of day one,
She's
there's
talking
the
about
dumpsters
Angels
were there.
Camp.
oh,
But Angels-
you're just talking
I'm
about
thinking
Angels.
of Utica, Angels Camp,
Yeah,
how that's
yeah.
gone stalled for several years, and,
All that Bazinet Hotel, Herb Bazinet made his money in gambling and prostitution. He made a lot of money, and he built that building, and it's concrete, and there's 4 foot between floors. It's really, really strong. He also built the Bank of Italy in Angels Camp. And, you know, people maybe don't know all these stories, but it was wide open prostitution and gambling up here until Pat Brown, Jerry Brown's father, shut it down in the 1950s. So this area in the
Wild.
Depression boomed. We had alcohol. So many of the buildings became, they were a
speakeasy.
saloon. Okay, they
Yeah.
closed it, they moved the saloon to the back, and they sold soft drinks in the front. But it continued as nothing happened. You know, and so this is unusual about during the Great Depression, that the foothills were booming. Mining was operating. All these other adjunct things were popular, and it's all lost.
Not that we want to bring back heavy gambling and prostitution, but talking about revitalizing, that's what we need to revitalize our towns so our young people stay here, so that, you know.
I know,
But-
but there's a thin balance between,
I know.
I mean, I don't want to say Murphy's, but it's our,
It is.
you know, the locals in Murphy's, this is not the town they moved to 20 years ago.
No.
No.
I
It is not-
remember it when it was just a little sleepy town with some
Right.
craft shops, and now you can't find a place to park, you know.
It's nothing but wine tasting and
Yeah.
boutiques and restaurants.
Yeah.
And as a longtime resident of Murphy's, I go to the Sierra Hills Market, I go to the Red Store,
Post
and-
office.
and the post office, everything out there, and I never go downtown.
Yeah.
Because why pay? And a lot of my friends own wineries. I mean, I went to Taco Tuesday at Hovey Winery the other day, and they're doing that, but there are very few local people that go there anymore.
Yeah.
And we've lost our community, and I think everybody wants to be like McCollum Hill.
Now,
I think so.
when I moved there, I mean, years ago, that was the second cousin that nobody talked about in that depressed area. So we talk about wanting economic development for Calaveras County, but there's a thin balance between making it Disneyland,
Right.
making it Gold Rush land,
Right.
and just having it packed and then having it economically depressed. We don't want West Point either,
Yeah.
right? Which could
Right.
use anything, but it's tricky. It's
Yeah, and
tricky.
You look at Valley Springs and Burson Wallace, and there's no character. You know, the old Plyler Lilies where we used to shop, and there was no Marvel. There was, you know, that was the grocery store for Valley Springs. But there was no, it didn't seem to have a character. So
A
each
heart.
of these,
A
Yeah.
community
yeah,
and
these
a heart.
communities have their little characters. Moke Hill is classy, you know, a classy little homey town, and it's got character. But, you know, you drive through San Andreas, you don't see Main Street. You see gas stations and some dilapidated buildings, and a hodgepodge. It doesn't have a feel, you know, that Murphy's has or
Well, what
Angel's.
saved, I think, both Murphy's and McCollum Hill were the bypass of the highways.
The highway bypassed it.
Yeah,
So that we no longer in Murphy's, you know, the logging trucks aren't going up and down Main Street. So people stand in the middle of Main Street now.
Right.
But, and McCollum Hill got bypassed, so everybody can feel comfortable walking up and down the streets.
mhm.
And you did all those, the gas stations and the services moved out of town.
Right,
And the quick stops,
Yeah.
you know, and the places for the through traffic moved out of town.
yeah,
And that saved it.
yeah,
Sutter Creek,
right, Sutter
the
Creek.
most recent bypass.
And they're
Yeah.
looking at, what, Angels Camp doing a bypass there someday or something?
Well, there is a bypass.
But,
Oh,
you know, for the trucks to go to, what?
Yeah.
Sonora.
To
Yeah.
Sonora, doing some sort
Although
of bypass
most
there.
of them take the new bypass and then go over
Oh, do
Parrots
they?
Ferry Bridge.
Oh, do they?
Because that turn by Carson
That
Oh,
Hill
horrible
yeah.
turn.
is a killer.
It's tough, isn't it?
Well,
It's
the one
tough.
over in Tuolumne is the worst one, right
Yeah.
at Tuttle
Well, that's
Town.
right.
Yeah, trucks get stuck there.
Oh, that one twisty one that
Yeah.
goes
you
around.
have to go.
Right, and the gears and everything, that they find it easier to go. Anyway, but you're right. I mean, all these are under discussion to
And
get
it's
them
hard
out
to-
of, get the traffic out of it.
It's hard to know what will bring them back. In Murphy's, it was Barden Steveno, who was, as I said, a good friend, then decided to build a winery, and everybody that worked for him then started their own winery. Even his girlfriend, Kate Calla, you know. So he was the impetus. And so everybody said, now we need a place to eat. And now we need a, you know, to buy, we want to buy high-end stuff, you know, and things like that. And so that happened, but it happened too heavily. I don't know, it just, you know, and the old-time things we used to do, the big event used to be Murphy's Homecoming. It's hardly held at all anymore because everything is around wine,
That's right.
which
yeah.
they will have 6,000 to 8,000 people a day there.
Well, we're back to the depression conditions, right? Where everybody comes up here for the wine.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's very hopeful to see what they're doing in San Andreas on Main Street. There's a
Yeah.
little revitalization committee, and they're doing some nice things. They put a little drinking fountain in there, and working on Nielsen
Nice.
Park. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
doing some painting and cleaning up a little bit. You know, it'd be nice to have them paint the Metropolitan roof, you know, or something. But that's an old structure we used to meet in.
It's a historic structure
It
now.
is.
Yeah.
I remember
it is.
Bo Vincent. I don't know if you remember him from Mountain Ranch. I don't know if you ever met him.
Who?
Bo Vincent.
Oh, Bo Vincent, yeah.
Yeah,
I
he was a
didn't know.
muralist that studied
didn't.
under Diego Rivera. Lived up here. Just a gem in the rough. I mean, he would drive his Cadillac and ford the creek, and he lived up off Swiss Ranch Road and would wear this big hat and would come to our writers' meetings for the cookies. You know, a character, real character.
Well, you know, Phil Alberts kind of revitalized Mountain Ranch. You know, he got the baseball field in there. He used to run a store. And so sometimes it can just take one person doing a lot of things.
Well, the Senders family. The
The
Senders,
Senders.
you know, keeping Mountain Ranch vitalized.
Well, that's the best store in
It
all
is.
of Calaveras County.
It sure is.
It has
You can
everything.
you can get anything you want, and if they don't have it, they'll order it for you and it'll come in a jiffy. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
you know.
It's wonderful. Well, is there something we've missed? You have a book that you've done.
Oh, I just,
Could you
I
share
brought this
that?
as a person, because in one of my milestones, my specialty is the California missions, and that's my dissertation was on that, and I've worked at probably half the missions in California, so that's my other life, which they don't care about. But a good dear friend of mine, Edna Kimbrough, was the best architectural historian for the missions, and she got partway into her book with the Getty Institute, and she died, and she left me to finish it. And so we added 6 more chapters, and I finished the book, and it turned out to be quite marvelous.
It's a
And
beautiful-
because the Getty Institute published it, it's beautiful.
It's a beautiful
And it's
book.
affordable. It's like
Yeah.
$35 or
Yeah.
something
And they
like
can
that.
get that from Amazon if
From
they order
Amazon,
it?
yeah.
At California
Or from the
Missions.
Getty.
And I think they should have that for the, the fourth graders, so they have a good resource to
Yes, and
go
then,
through. Because it used to be California history. I came from the LA area originally, and
Yeah.
we would go to all the missions. That was part of our
Oh, yeah,
elementary
we all built our
trips.
missions.
I think I went to probably 20 missions.
Yeah.
I was on our curriculum.
yeah.
I mean, I did a little extracurricular there.
Oh, yes, you
I told my mom, I said, I need to go to the missions, and she said, okay. I said, it's part of the assignment, it's part of, it was required for LA district, but I didn't tell her the total truth. I just wanted to go, I just loved it.
Yeah.
Look at those old missions, and San Gabriel, all of them, Santa Barbara, all the little,
I know.
oh my gosh. And they're all in
there's
here? They're all in here?
Yes, they're all
Oh my
in there.
gosh.
There's a general history of, pre-contact, contact, art in the missions, and then the abandonment, the American period, and then the revival.
Yeah.
And then in the back, there's 4 pages on each mission with old maps and things like
Oh,
that.
that's great.
So
Yeah.
it's a really good book.
Yeah.
But it also balances, there are many people in California who think the world began with the gold rush.
Mm.
And if they didn't live in, LA near the plaza or
Right.
Santa Barbara or something, they're kind of like, the history of California begins with the gold rush, and you want to go, wait. There was actually a whole
Yeah.
epic going on before they got here.
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, another resource that's coming out September 1st is California State Parks is developing all these things around the parks that are digitally that can be used for teachers in the schools.
Oh, really?
And it'll be available September 1st. And you can go on there and you get all kinds of things for your class to do,
That's
and
great.
photos and workshops and all kinds of things like that. And I think that's a really important thing the parks do, because not all kids can get to
Mm-mm.
Northern California or Southern
Right.
California or
Right.
something like that.
So for us, the big trees would be
Right.
something the teachers could tap into right here in the county.
Yeah.
The history of that.
And as to publications, I think it's really important. There are these laws that require you to do resource recovery if a building is going to be destroyed. And I've worked a lot recently at Lake Tahoe, because every multimillionaire wants a building on the shores, and they're not available, so they tear down these historic buildings.
Mhm.
But all we're required to do now is take large format photographs and write a report, again, which goes into
Where?
Secretary of the Interior in
Yeah,
Washington.
Nobody sees it.
It's like Raiders of
Very-
the Lost Ark when they took it down in that scene when they're going down the
Yeah, yeah.
archive. Yeah, that's pretty much where our reports go.
Wow.
So I've been talking to
Mhm.
North Lake Tahoe Historical Society about doing a website like Joy and I did,
Mhm.
and using reports from other archaeologists we know there. But it's something not just Calaveras, but anybody could do, any county could do, is link all these together and put their reports someplace where people can read them or know about them,
And then with your mission of simplifying some of these and having them as
Right,
yeah.
a
Teasing
booklet.
out what's actually.
And once we get into it, we don't understand,
You don't
the
care, it's too
technical-
much detail.
Yeah,
You just-
exactly.
Yeah.
But somebody's going to want that detail someday.
Well, that's why they're archived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like a reference book.
Right.
Right. But you want people who just want to know, was there anything interesting, and what did you find, and what's important about that building? They don't want a big report, they want
Yeah.
distilled out and teased out.
And so, and going back to my property with that hearth there,
Yeah.
I don't want it to be destroyed. I know they recreated that one, they put it together at the museum, at the Calaveras Museum.
That
You
was
did
me.
it. That was you?
Yeah.
That's amazing, because most,
Yeah.
those get destroyed over time. Ours is still intact.
It's a great story there.
I have the iron door, and I have to be careful, because they have roving ne'er-do-wells who look for metal and scrap and stuff, and that would have been stolen. So we have it preserved,
How did you preserve it?
I have it protected in a safe place.
There we go, that's
And
right.
it's fireproof, we have it underground. So.
Well, we had for years had to monitor the shutter from the Shutter Tree Park in Oak Hill,
Ah,
which was stuck in the ground, and then I
Yeah.
did an excavation in '97, and we excavated it out, and it sat on the front porch of the library for 20 years. Until now, it's embedded into this wonderful mosaic that's on the side of the
Mm.
library wall with the
Yeah.
tree
Oh,
redone.
that's right.
Yeah,
That beautiful.
the beautiful mosaic, but
yeah,
the
that
shutter is
mosaic, yeah.
finally back in a shutter tree in the park. But yes, all those years that somebody's going to steal it.
Somebody's gonna steal it and melt it down for scrap. Just the thought of it is horrors, you know. But what do I do with something like this? I have this hearth. I know there's gonna be a ton of money involved, and, you know, the average person doesn't
That's
think
the
about
problem,
that.
yeah.
But time is eroding this thing, and I wanna preserve it.
Right.
Yeah, so, you know,
You just get, like, right now, our hotel in Sheep Ranch, the Pioneer Hotel, we just decided we're going to list that on the National Register. At least it'll be recorded somewhere. That's all we can do.
This is the
Yeah, I do it
cobbler's,
for
the
everybody
cobbler's
else.
kids
but-
go barefoot, right? This is
Right.
Judy Marvin, Sheep Ranch Hotel is not listed on the National Register. Or your house?
My house, I'm going to do that too.
are you
Well,
perfectly preserved?
Which is
then?
only the example that there's so many resources in the county that are not on existing lists.
And people are a little nervous to start doing that. They have you know, like my hearth, for instance. Yeah, I don't know where to begin. But that's something I can research and figure out and see.
You could do a primary record on an archaeological site.
Okay.
You could get it,
I
the
could.
simplest thing.
Simplest thing.
Take a picture, do a little
Okay.
history, get it on a USGS map,
Yeah.
and send it and it'd be recorded.
Okay, that seems simple enough to
Yeah,
start.
Yeah.
Well, there's
I like
something,
that.
is Chris, California Historical Resources, what is it? Our
Information system.
Information system.
Information system.
And anybody can go and get online a primary record, print it out, write everything in, and send it to the local information center, which in our case is Turlock,
Okay.
California State University, Turlock.
Mhm.
And then it's on a record, and if some developer comes in and goes, I just want to blow this away.
That's right.
Somebody goes, there's something there, instead
Right.
of, yeah.
It doesn't mean it will be preserved, but it means somebody has to go, wait a minute,
Uh-huh.
we have to assess this.
Right.
It also needs
Slows them
that
down a little
map
bit.
on an official USGS
Mhm.
map, the dot and a
Yeah.
simple record. But that's an easy step to take.
Yeah.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good to know.
And you can do that.
I'm going to do that. Because I'm so afraid. I guess, I wasn't born here in this country, and coming here, I was looking for a home. Where's my home? Calaveras is my home, but now, after 45 years. or
Where were you
something here.
born?
I was born in Germany.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, being an immigrant, all those years and trying to settle, where is home, So, and you can't go back, right, to home because that's an abstraction over there. But we make our home. We decide we want to stay here. We want to preserve it. We're going to set roots down. Kids were, raised here, and dig in your heels and make it a better place. That's the thing. Keep it going and preserve it. That's important. Otherwise, it just dissipates, right? Like the sand, like
And
the
then you
dust.
just have fast food joints all the way down
I know.
the
Yeah,
main
well,
street.
Yeah, I remember LA would drive down to San Diego and it was just avocado and
Yeah.
orange groves
Mhm.
and cattle grazing on the sides. I mean, open tracts of land. And I still have it in my mind,
Right.
So,
But in the long view of human history on Earth, these things will not be preserved. I mean,
that's true.
this is not. So the other is enjoy them now.
Mhm.
Take what enjoyment there is out of them, share it with friends,
Yeah,
write books, enjoy them, do all that,
Right.
because 200 years from now, 500 years from
Yeah.
now, no.
no,
It is ephemeral in the world terms, but
right.
so not to be caught up too much with everything has to remain static,
Right.
but just what is it that's important out of it?
Right.
And what can we tease out of it? And what can we enjoy now and have people share?
And the knowledge of it existing once.
Yes,
It's
Right.
good stuff.
Right.
Good stuff. We're part of history.
yeah.
We forget we're part of history. So, anyway, I think is there?
I think we're
something-
done.
I think we're
We're
done.
done.
I think we have covered. I'd love to get some scanned documents
just
and
give
put
them
that
to
up.
you,
Yeah. But it's, thank you so much for coming and
Yes.
doing this, and
Thank you for doing what you're doing.
Thank you.